They tell you to enjoy every moment because one day the house will be quiet. What they don't tell you is that the quiet can be deafening. You spend years wiping counters, packing lunches, driving carpools, answering endless questions. And then one day, no one calls your name. The doors stay closed. The house doesn't echo with the laughter anymore. And you're left standing in the middle of it all, wondering, where did I go? If you've ever stood in that stillness, half grieving, half free, you're not alone. This isn't a story about loss. It's a story about what happens next, because maybe the quiet isn't the end. Maybe it's the invitation we've been too busy to hear. The house is quiet now, not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, the kind that feels like something's missing. You don't notice it at first, not when you're busy, organizing linens or returning the coffee mug to the sink. But later in the stillness between tasks, it hits you. That soft, hollow hush, the echo of a room that used to breathe. Once this house was loud. Laughter down the hallway doors, opening and closing, the beep of the microwave reheating late-night leftovers. Even the chaos had a rhythm to it. Backpacks dropped in the entryway, music from bedrooms, footsteps on the stairs. I used to wish for silence. Back then it felt like a luxury. Now it just feels like space. I'm not quite sure how to fill. This morning I walked past my daughter's old room. The bed is neatly made. There's a stack of books on the shelf, still in the exact order she left them. I haven't had the heart to move them. Her perfume still lingers in the air, faint but real. I stood there for a minute, pretending she might walk back in, tell me she forgot something. But she didn't. She's off doing what I always hoped she'd do, growing, flying, living her own life. And I'm proud, God, I'm proud, but I wasn't ready for the silence she left behind. There's no guidebook for this part. No one tells you what to do when the children are grown and the calendar is suddenly yours again. I find myself standing in the kitchen, coffee in hand, wondering, who am I now? The first time I noticed the ache, it was on a Sunday. Not a special Sunday, just one of those soft gray mornings that used to be full of chores and sleepy voices. There was no smell of pancakes, no mess in the bathroom, no laughter from the living room, just me, a half-full cup of coffee, cooling on the windowsill. I kept checking my phone like someone might text me to ask what time brunch was or if I'd seen their hoodie. But the notifications were quiet. That's when it hit me. This isn't a pause. This is what the next chapter looks like. And I don't know why it surprised me so much. I raised them to leave, didn't I? Every scraped knee I kissed, every night I stayed up waiting for them to come home. Every lunch packed, every college brochure I helped open, it was all pointing to this: independence, flight, growth. I whispered, you can do it, in their ears for years. I meant it, but no one prepared me for what I'd feel once they actually left. There's a strange grief to it, not loud or cinematic, but slow like a tide pulling away from the shore. It's not about wanting them back, not really. I don't want to shrink them or trap them here. I want them to live. But the part of me that was tied to their rhythm school pickups, evening check-ins, birthdays, dance recitals, that part is now untethered. Sometimes I sit at the dining table and stare at the empty chairs. I think about all the times we laughed around that table, fought, cried, celebrated. I think about the meals I made, the way I used to light candles even for ordinary dinners. I think about how loud it all was and how much I wanted a break back then. And I wonder, did I soak it all in, or was I too tired, too rushed? too focused on the next task. I know I'm not alone in this, but it feels lonely, doesn't it? I spoke to a friend recently. Her last child moved out, 6 months before mine. I asked her when it starts feeling normal again. She smiled gently and said, "It doesn't, but eventually it starts feeling quieter in a good way." I didn't understand what she meant until a few days ago. I was walking through the garden alone, and for the first time in weeks, I noticed the scent of jasmine. It stopped me, not because the jasmine was new, but because I was finally still enough to notice it. And that's the ache, I think. It's not just missing your children. It's missing the version of yourself that only existed in that role mother, comforter, manager of chaos. You wake up one morning and realize you don't know exactly who you are anymore. You only know who you were when they needed you. But here's what I'm learning. Just because that version of me is fading doesn't mean I'm fading too. She's still here, a little raw, a little uncertain, but still here. There's a mirror in my hallway, long, narrow, framed in wood, that's starting to chip around the edges. I walk past it every day. For years, I barely looked at it. I'd glance, maybe check if there was flour on my shirt, or if I still had mascara under my eyes after a cry. But last week, something made me stop. I didn't expect to see her, that woman, looking back at me. Her eyes were familiar, but softer somehow. Not in the way youth softens you, but in the way time does, worn around the edges, but deeper. I stared for longer than usual, like I was waiting for something to move, for a flicker of recognition. And then it came, not as a memory, but as a question. Who are you now that no one is calling your name? It stopped me, because for the longest time, I've answered to everyone else's needs. I was mom before I was fully me. I was the problem solver, the comforter, the keeper of schedules, the soft place to land. And I was proud of it, still am, but somewhere in all that giving, I lost track of my own name. Standing there in the hallway in pajamas and slippers, I whispered it out loud, my first name, just once, just to hear it again. It felt strange, like saying the name of a distant friend you haven't seen in years. You remember the sound, but not how it fits. I think we all need a mirror moment. A time when we stop, take inventory, and ask what's left of me, when no one's asking for anything. The truth is, I didn't know, not really, but I wanted to find out. That day I made a list. Not a to-do list, God knows I've written enough of those. This one was different. I wrote down things I used to love before life got so full. Things that made me feel like me. It wasn't grand or dramatic, just small truths. I used to write poetry in the margins of old notebooks. I loved dancing in the kitchen when no one was watching. I always wanted to learn Italian. I once dreamed of hiking through the Scottish Highlands. I stared at that list for a long time, then laughed quietly. I hadn't thought of those things in decades. Somewhere between diapers and graduations, they'd been filed away like dusty books on a shelf. But here's the thing, now that shelf is open, there's space. And maybe for the first time in a long time, I can take one of those dreams down, hold it in my hands, and see if it still fits. That night, I lit a candle just for myself. I sat with a glass of tea and read an old novel I used to love. Not to prove anything, not to be productive, just to be with myself. And it felt like the first gentle knock on a door I'd forgotten was locked from the inside. The house is still quiet, but now it feels less hollow, more like a pause, a breath, a beginning. It started small, quieter than I expected. No big declarations, no life-altering decisions. Just a tiny voice inside that began asking, what if? What if I could be more than the roles I've played? What if I could start something now, just for me? What if this quiet isn't an ending, but the clearing before something new? One morning, I went for a walk. Not a power walk, not with a podcast in my ears or a phone in my hand. Just me and the sound of my shoes on the pavement. I passed a little art studio tucked between a cafe and a tailor shop. It had a sign in the window, Beginner's Watercolor Class. Thursdays at 10 a.m. I stopped. I don't paint. I've never painted. But something about that sign made me want to turn the doorknob. I didn't go in, not that day, but I went home and Googled it. And I smiled at the thought of walking in a week later, with no experience, just curiosity. That smile felt new, like the very beginning of warmth after a long winter. Later that week, I reorganized the guest room, the one that used to be my son's. I left his keepsakes, of course, his trophies, the old posters he never took down. But I moved the desk to the window and set a small notebook on top. I didn't write anything that day, just sat there, watching the light change across the floorboards, listening to the clock tick. There was something sacred in that stillness, something mine. I think for so long, I'd forgotten what it feels like to choose something just because it brings me joy. Not because it checks a box or helps someone else, not because it's practical or necessary, but because it stirs something inside me I haven't heard in years. Joy doesn't have to be loud to be life-changing. I made a list again, this time not about what I used to love, but what I want to try now. Try a recipe I've never cooked before just for fun. Visit the museum downtown and take my time. Start walking with no destination and let my feet decide. Call an old friend I haven't spoken to in years just to say hello. Write down one memory a day, not for anyone else. Just to remember that I lived it. I don't have a plan, not a big one, but maybe I don't need one right now. I've spent so many years planning for others. The school forms the birthday parties, the family vacations, the future that wasn't mine alone. Now I'm learning to follow the small sparks, the ones that don't shout but tug gently, like a thread waiting to be pulled. And it's strange, but in these small shifts, I feel something inside me waking up. Not a version of me from before, not some old self I'm trying to return to, but a new one. A woman who carries all the years and still dares to ask, what else might life hold for me now? There's a quiet kind of courage in starting small, lighting a candle when the house is dark, writing your name at the top of a fresh page, walking into a class where no one knows your story, making space for a life that's still unfolding. And maybe that's what becoming is. Not a loud transformation, not a clean break from the past, but a slow turning toward yourself, a remembering, a rerouting, a beginning again. The house is still quiet, the kind of quiet that lingers in doorways, in the spaces where voices used to live. But now it doesn't ache the way it once did. It hums, like something is about to begin. I'm still figuring it out. I don't have all the answers, but I've stopped waiting for the noise to return. And instead, I'm listening for something else myself. Some days I still feel untethered. I still miss the mess and the motion. But other days I catch myself smiling at something small. An old song, the way the light falls through the window, the peace of a quiet morning I didn't have to earn. And on those days I remember I am not done. I am still becoming. Becoming isn't loud or fast. It's not fireworks. It's not a grand entrance. It's softer than that. It's sitting with your own company and feeling whole. It's lighting a candle just because. It's choosing something, anything that's just for you. If you're listening to this in your own quiet house, wondering where you went after the children grew, after the calendar emptied, let me say this to you. You haven't disappeared. You've only just returned to yourself. This is your time not to start over, but to start deeper. Not to chase youth, but to claim your wisdom. Not to be needed, but to be known. Fully, gently, truthfully, you are allowed to want things again. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to bloom quietly, wildly, and in your own time. So let this be your beginning. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not too late. The house is quiet, but you are just beginning. Thank you for sharing this quiet moment with me. If this story echoed something in you, if it reminded you of a feeling you haven't had words for, I hope you'll stay a while. There's a whole world of women walking through this same season, and sometimes knowing we're not alone is the beginning of healing. So if you're ready, you're welcome to share your story in the comments. Tell us where you are in your journey. Tell us what you're beginning or what you're still learning to let go of. And if this space felt like a soft place to land today, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. There are more stories coming, gentle, real, and made just for you. Until next time, take your time, take a breath, and remember, you are not behind, you are not too late, you are not alone. You're just beginning.